Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. This week we have part 2 of the granulation palette close-up. In part 1 we saw the first 9 colors that are in my granulation palette, and now we are diving in for part 2 with the last 9 colors in that palette, which is in all 18 colors of granulating paints. Now we are starting off with a good one because this is Forest Blue by Schmincke, and I find it to be quite a diverse granulating paint, so I do tend to gravitate towards this one. I do like blue and cool colors myself in my work quite a bit, so that might explain why. It is made up of 2 pigments, a blue pigment, PB36, and a black pigment, PBK11. Now, as you can see, it does back bloom quite nicely, and it can be quite veiny, which can also add some grit and extra texture if you want it. And as per usual, you will also see this paint as it dries and as I play around with the water amount and amount of paint on screen for you guys, so you can really see what this paint does. Now this color is a bit more to the neutral cooler side, as I mentioned, and I also used this color quite a lot in the creeper illustration I did. The video of that is also on my channel if you are interested, but I found it to be a really nice color to really go against some of the warm tones that are sometimes found in the granulation paints by Schmincke that tend to be more towards the green side. So I find this a really nice color to work with, and yeah, it's grayish blue and a lot of granulation. I mean, what's not to like? I use this color for anything from forest work because the name is super fitting, so you can definitely do that. But again, this would be a perfect gray for some cool tones in a painting that you want. It could be nice as a background, and it could be nice as texture for a grayish rock. Moving right along, we have number 2 of this video, and that is Cobalt Green Dark by Schmincke. Now this is not their super granulating range. I actually bought this Cobalt Green Dark because I really want to make my own mixes and see how that works out, and if I can make some super granulating paints on my own that fit my unique style, so that's not straight out of the bottle. And I saw a lot of colors using PG26 in their super granulating range, and this is PG26 all on its own, so a granulating green color that I will eventually get to experiment and see how to make my own granulating mixtures of that paint. If you guys might be interested, let me know. I will make a video about mixing the paints and seeing the results. Next up is the Forest Brown by Schmincke. Now this is actually one of their super granulating paints. As the name forest implies, it is part of those 5 colors that they actually geared towards painting forestry and landscapes. Now it is called Forest Brown, but as you can see on screen, it is quite greenish, and it's not a silly thing because if you look at the pigments, there's 3 of them. There is PG26 as first mentioned, which is that Cobalt Green Dark that you just saw. Now there is some brown in it. It is a PBR7, and it also has a yellow PY43 in there. And I do have to say, if you wait a little while, you will see the brownish tint here and there, but personally, I use it more as a straight up green color, and it has some variation, which is nice, and the extra texture of the granulation. But to buy this paint going in blind, you might expect it to be way more brown on your paper than it actually turns out to be. So be aware of that when buying this paint off the internet. Be sure it is what you want it to be. And that brings us to one of my favorite colors in my granulating palette. It is Forest Gray by Schmincke. Now this super granulating paint is a gray, but it tends to be a bit on the warm side, so there is some brown in there. And somehow I just can't seem to capture the beauty of this paint completely on camera. And I have tried a lot, but I just can't seem to really get it. It might be the paper I was using, but I really, really like this paint because I can use it for so many things. It gives me great granulation, and it gives me heavy granulation, as you can see in the more left part. But if you dilute it a lot, it will give you very fine granulation, as you can see on the right side before I drop that blob of paint in. It is made up of 3 pigments. That is the PBR7, a brown pigment, PG50, and PBK11, which is a black pigment and a green pigment. It gives this paint a lot of depth, and it will be different in every project you paint depending on how you use it. I highly recommend this paint, you guys, and I'm sorry I didn't capture it better on camera. Onward to our very first Daniel Smith paint in this video. It is the Minnesota Pipestone Genuine by Daniel Smith. As the name Genuine implies, it is one of their Primatech colors made up of real minerals, as they say. So I am not familiar with the mineral Minnesota Pipestone at all, but I can say that it makes for a lovely granulating paint. What do I use this paint for? I find it super helpful when I want to create a skin tone, especially if you dilute it strongly with just a little bit of granulation, giving your skin a bit of texture instead of that airbrushed, face-tuned appearance. I find this paint very, very useful, and I got it off a dot card I once received with an order I placed, and I used that dot so quickly. I just knew I had to get my very own little tube of this paint. So it will have a permanent place on my granulating palettes. I really, really like this one. Back to Schmincke's paints. The Galaxy range has a Galaxy Brown in there, and this is true to name a brown color. The fun thing about this brown is that there is some violet mixed in there, because the pigments are PV62, so that's the violet, and PBR6, which is the brown color. So you can see the violet here and there peeking through, sometimes more than other times, but it is definitely there, giving this brown color a little bit more depth and playfulness. You could use this brown to paint tree bark, you can use it to paint soil, you could use it to paint skin tones, you can even use it to paint something like the exterior of a house if you're more into architectural drawings. As you can see, the granulation can be medium to fine, looking at how much you dilute this paint, and it can give you some nice effects. As you can see on screen now, the veiny structure of back blooms don't seem to hold as well in this paint as we have seen before with, for example, the forest blue in this video. So if that is something that you are looking for in a paint, then this may not be the best option for you. Next up is Caput Mortum by Schmincke. This paint is made up of 2 pigments, PR101 and PR206. So seeing as they are both red pigments, they will probably not give as a versatile feature to the paint as you might expect with completely different pigments, as we have seen in the colors also including a black or a violet when they are not based on that type of main color. But this paint does granulate heavily, and I just really found the name appealing for gritty work. So I also tend to use it for things like flesh or wounds that have been torn open. Also with the creeper process that I did, I found this paint really lovely because it doesn't tend to overpower toward the fire engine red. It is more of an earthy red tone, and it has a very strong, heavy granulation in there. So I am really digging this Caput Mortum by Schmincke, and I found very many uses for it. I think I've said very a lot. I'm sorry about that. I have a lot of uses for this paint, but depending on what type of work you make, it may not be your cup of tea completely, but it does give you a very nice granulation in a more earthy red tone. The two paints coming up might seem a little bit bland or boring to you guys compared to the paints we have seen before all of these, but they are paints just like the Cobalt Green Dark. They are strong granulating paints that actually are featured in a lot of the super granulation range by Schmincke. So this also is a color that I put in there because I want to see if I can make my own mixes with this. My own mixes to make my own granulating paints from. This is the Mohagany Brown by Schmincke, and it is the PBR 33 pigment. And as you can see, it does seem a little bit reddish and brownish. Quite a plain brown, but that granulation does look nice. Now this Mars Brown by Schmincke is the same type of paint. So it is a PBR 6, which is actually also the pigment used in the Galaxy Brown that you saw before, that brown with a little bit of violet in it. Now you do see that this is a different type of brown, but also a very strongly granulating brown. So I also put this in my palette to make some nice super granulating mixtures with. Even though I bought it with that purpose to mix it in with other paints, of course this paint is very well usable for other things on its own. Depending on the type of paper you use it with, the type of granulation this paint shows actually could be very useful when you want to create a fur type of pattern on an animal subject, for instance. So don't just think it's a boring brown color, but that granulation really can help you. And will you look at the veins that you get with back blooms? So it's really a nice color, and don't underestimate it. And that, you guys, is the last granulating paint that makes up my granulating palette. I hope you guys enjoyed this 2-part series on my granulation palette. And if you did, consider maybe leaving a like or a comment, or maybe even subscribing to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!